This week, millions of Australians have tuned in to watch some of the Swimming Australia trials that wrap up in Brisbane tomorrow. We've seen world records broken, inspiring returns to form, and an outpouring of emotion from families in the stands watching their athletes book a spot on the plane to either the Olympics or Paralympics coming up very soon in Paris. But we've also seen some moments of sadness, moments where a number of milliseconds might have proven the difference between a spot in the Olympic squad or another 4-year wait until the next crack at what most agree is the pinnacle of the sport. But there's no denying that what we've seen this week has been an incredible display of Australian talent in the pool. And it got us thinking, why is Australia so good at swimming?
You mentioned in the intro that we have broken some world records already in these trials.
Yeah.
On Wednesday night, during the 200-metre freestyle, we didn't just break the world record once, we broke it twice.
In the same race.
It was unbelievable. Watching Ariarne Titmus and Molly O'Callaghan both beat the world record, coming first and second. They were also about half a body length in front of the world record line.
It was just so dominant. They're actually training partners, which makes it even more special as well. But it definitely kind of gives you a sense that come Paris, the swimming starts on the 27th of July, we're going to be coming home with some medals.
I cannot wait. Can we first just establish actually how good Australia is at swimming in a global context?
Look, we're really good. I mean, the US may have more gold medals than us across all swimming events, but when you consider the size of our population compared to theirs, we're punching well above our weight. And that's actually the case with most countries in the world when it comes to swimming. So overall, Australia has won one gold medal in the pool for every 384,000 Australians. In the US, that's one per 1.1 million. So we overperform when it gets to, a bit of backstroke.
So we're damn good, especially when we consider our population size, which is relatively small. What is our secret sauce?
I thought I'd break it down into 4 main categories. We make Australians swim, we celebrate Australian swimmers, we spend a lot of money, and we have really high standards. So let's talk about those first 2 reasons. We make Australians swim and we celebrate Australian swimmers. Because I think that really does set the important context, and then we can have the discussion about money and standards. So swimming is more than a sport in Australia. It's a really significant part of our national culture. I mean, most kids have swimming lessons. They often do it through their school, and that also adds a whole social element to it. A report released early last year by Royal Lifesaving Australia showed that 1.7 million kids were currently in swimming lessons. And Australia has these national benchmarks, so these standards the government sets. And they say that every child by the age of 12 should be able to swim 50 metres, and that half of Australian children by the age of 17 should be able to swim 400 metres.
And that's not about finding the next Olympian, is it? That's more about safety.
Exactly. So this is not to find the next Ariarne Titmus. This is about preventing drowning deaths. But undeniably, the fact that we all have mandatory swimming lessons, or most of the country has mandatory swimming lessons, does contribute to that cultural appreciation of swimming. Point 2 in my lecture on why we're so good at swimming. And if you think about it, I mean, we've got swimmers like Dawn Fraser, Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett, Libby Trickett, Liesl Jones, Stephanie Rice, and more recently, new heroes like Emma McKeon, Ariarne Titmus, Kaylee McEwen, and Cam McAvoy. These are all household names. And there's definitely a role that these heroes play in inspiring youth participation, inspiring kids to enter competitions, and inspiring them to get up at 5 a.m. and go and train in the pool in the dark. And that's actually what you really need to build the next generation of excellent sports people.
Okay, so we understand that Australians from a young age are really encouraged to take up swimming, mostly for safety, and that Australians look up to our swimmers because we have so many incredible ones. But surely those things aren't enough alone to bring home that many gold medals. What else are the reasons?
Well, I think we need to go to this third reason, and the one that we should probably spend the most time on because it's a little complex, but we spend so much money on winning gold medals in the pool. So I was trying to work out how much does it really cost to win a gold medal in swimming. And I started by looking at where money from swimming comes from. And it seems to me there are kind of 3 core avenues. So there's Swimming Australia, the peak body for the sport, the Australian Olympic Committee, the peak body for the event, and the Australian Institute of Sport, which is run by the Australian Sports Commission. And think of that as kind of the government's sports arm. Then there's also philanthropy, like last year's $3 million donation from billionaire Gina Rinehart, which went to swimmers, rowers, and volleyballers. But I think that kind of comes in, that philanthropy element more for bonuses for winning medals rather than funding to get people to an elite stage.
But it could make swimming more of an attractive sport when you have those bonuses.
100%. Financial incentives play a role. But a lot of this spend really happens at the ground level. So if we start with Swimming Australia, I looked at their annual financial report. The last one available publicly was from 2021-22. And keep in mind, this was during the pandemic, so competition was limited, travel was limited, and it was the year after the Olympics. They spent about $26 million in that year. That included $8 million on their employees, $3.5 million on travel, and over $4 million on swimmers, coaches, and sports science. So that's a really big organisation. Then there's the Australian Olympic Committee, which also funds some of the same athletes and coaches. They also provide medal incentives like the billionaires. They're spending about $25 million a year.
Hello, I'm James and I produce the video you're watching. If you're enjoying what you're watching, we'd love it if you considered subscribing and checking us out on our other platforms. It'd really help in getting the word out about what we're doing here at TDA. Thanks very much, and now back to the deep dive.
But then you also have money from the Australian government, right?
100%. And the federal government, and by extension, their Australian Sports Commission and the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, which is run by that commission, they spent a lot of money. So in the 2022-23 financial year, the government spent $332 million on sport and recreation.
Wow. So your third reason, the TLDR, we spend a lot of money on swimming.
We spend a lot of money on making sure we win medals.
Okay, so let's move to your last reason now. And I think that this is one that has come up a lot for people who are watching the trials this week, because Australia swimming actually has much harsher qualifying times than the Olympics does. It's a bit confusing. Can you just take us through this?
So this is definitely something the armchair experts have picked up over the last couple of nights. I've noticed in the commentary this week, they're talking a lot about this Swimming Australia qualifying time bar. So there's two ideas here. There's an Olympic qualifying time, but there's also a Swimming Australia qualifying time. And the Swimming Australia qualifying times are harder than the global qualifying times that most other nations use as their way to work out if one of their athletes are going to be sent to Paris. So the US, for example, if you are a swimmer and you meet the time that you need to set by the World Organization, you're off to Paris. In Australia, it's a little harder. I'm just going to touch just on the Olympics, not the Paralympics for this example, because I think we're getting a bit long here. But the first thing I learned is that there is a cap on how many swimmers we can send to the Olympics. So we send 26 men and 26 women. And with that few spots available, the higher qualifying time is the way that Swimming Australia says that they're narrowing that field. Only the best, the top of the cream on your latte are going to Paris. So there was a statement from Swimming Australia when they released the times. It said the higher standards are necessary for Australia to compete against the world's best, and that the qualifying times are part of a high-performance strategy that gives athletes the best chance to convert. And convert there means winning a medal. The head coach, his name's Rowan Taylor, he said, this is a successful formula that we have used for the past 10 years. Is it tough? Yes, it is. But it's also an important part of the process to develop athletes that can manage the load and perform when it matters most. And really what he's saying there is, we're only going to put you on a plane to Paris if we think you can seriously compete and probably come home with a medal.
And where do these qualifying times from Australia swimming actually come from? Do they just make it up?
No, I initially thought they kind of might just trim 10% off the time or something to make sure that the best are going. But it is based on something. So they looked at the 2023 World Aquatic Swimming Championships in Japan. They looked at who qualified in the 8th position for the final in that race. So think of them as one of the swimmers in either lane 1 or lane 8 in the final. And that's the time in that category that was then the Swimming Australia time.
Right.
Now, there were some examples where that was actually slower than the world time. They just picked the faster of the two.
And that can lead to a lot of heartbreak, which we have seen at the trials this week.
Yeah, there's been some athletes who have missed out on a spot on the plane to Paris because even though they've qualified by world standards, they haven't qualified by Australian standards. There are some technicalities in the qualification document that say there can be a bit of discretion, and there's kind of a couple of grey areas here. You know, if you're going to the Olympics for another event, you can actually qualify for a second or third or fourth event a little easier. And that goes to that total number of people in the team. But on the whole, this is the pain of elite sport.
Such an interesting explainer. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Daily Oz. We will be back again on Monday.